Good morning and welcome. My name is Lindsay Bryant, and today I'd like to share a brief presentation about the Sydney Opera House. This project is often studied as an example of project failure, and not without reason. The many failures throughout this project created the perfect storm, resulting in a project that was completed almost 10 years late and almost 1,500% over budget. Let's look at a brief synopsis of the Sydney Opera House project. The Sydney Opera House began in 1957 with an international design competition sponsored by the Australian government. Championed by New South Wales Premier Joseph Cahill, applicants were given a 25-page rulebook and charged an entrance fee of £10. Danish architect Jorn Utzon was chosen as the winner. It was estimated that his modern sculptural design would cost £3.5 million to complete. Utzon completed his Red Book design package in 1958. At this point, it was estimated that the Opera House would open in 1963. However, Utzon's incomplete design package presented roof design geometry that was structurally unsound, rendering the timeline and budget inaccurate. This lack of a feasible design package meant that the engineering and construction did not have the information needed to realize the design. However, instead of reevaluating design flaws and engineering issues, construction proceeded at the behest of the government. The lack of a feasible roof design meant that the engineering firm struggled for 3 years to find an efficient way to construct the roof shells, because no two were alike. In 1962, Utzon submitted the Yellow Book, a new design package in which the roof shells utilized the same geometry and could be prefabricated. When roof construction began in 1963, the building was behind schedule and almost 4 times over budget. At this point, the party in power in the Australian government changed, as did the primary engineer. Differences between Utzon and the government resulted in new architect Peter Hall stepping in. The roof was finally completed in 1967. The interior took another 6 years to complete, with the grand opening celebrated in 1973. This project has more than a few points of failure. Most notably, the Opera House finished almost £100 million Australian over budget and 10 years behind schedule. However, there are many other issues that should be noted. The scope, budget, and timeline were not based on a complete design package, only on renderings and concept designs. There was no project manager. The only management came from the architect and the primary engineer. There was no consistent organizer or manager throughout the entire project. Design and engineering problems were not addressed before construction began. Parts of the structure had to be rebuilt in order to accommodate the weight of the roof due to lack of complete designs at the time of initial construction. There were multiple changes in scope, including the government demanding a change in seating arrangements after construction had begun. There was very little use of project management tools such as control change orders, problem-solving tools, established and proven processes, and budgeting and progress monitoring tools. It can be argued that almost all elements of this project fell under procurement. One could argue that the client was the government of New South Wales, and even that did not provide consistency to the project. Original sponsor and champion Joseph Cahill was replaced by Minister of Public Works Norman Ryan, who had very different ideas of what the deliverables should consist. This differing opinion led to architect Utzon stepping down and being replaced by Peter Hall. In addition, the change in engineers meant that the 3 critical players, architect, engineer, and project sponsor/client, all changed through the course of the project. Combined with the change in scope and deliverables, how could any of the suppliers possibly deliver consistent, high-quality, and timely results? The project was doomed to fail from the beginning due to the lack of planning on the front end. The scope was ambiguous at best, and the lack of specificities meant that changes and issues were not addressed properly. A budget that wasn't based on a work breakdown structure was wishful thinking at best and had no basis in reality. The lack of a project manager resulted in no singular voice of reason. Perhaps the most egregious failure, aside from the lack of a project manager, was the lack of a completed design and engineering package. Without clear communication of the end goal, the team had no way to get there. The scope did not encapsulate the fact that new engineering and construction techniques, as well as materials manufacturing, would have to be developed in order to realize the design. Any supplier downstream of the lack of a completed design and engineering package had no chance of succeeding within the original parameters of the project. Many of the issues that occurred during the Sydney Opera House project could have been avoided with the right planning and project manager. Any project management and problem-solving approaches would have been better than nothing. Though a more agile approach may have worked better with the changing demands of the architecture and engineering, there are certain orders in which tasks must be completed, and beginning construction without finalized design and engineering drawings was short-sighted and foolish. Without quality goals, suppliers could not hope to provide deliverables that would meet the requirements, because the requirements were often not defined, or changed throughout the process. The lack of a big picture, unified vision, along with the work breakdown structure needed to support the vision, meant that no one could deliver what was needed, because what was needed at any given time was unknown. What's more, the government, as the client, failed to form good, consistent relationships with its suppliers. The lack of a relationship and the associated inconsistencies led to Utzon leaving the project. The formation of good working relationships would have enabled more boundaries to be established, which would have meant that the project would have progressed more efficiently and predictably, without many of the major speed bumps that it encountered along the way. At the minimum, these relationships would have enabled the project to establish the needed processes, both for project momentum and problem solving. The lack of these processes meant that everything was open-ended, with no major milestones except completion of the 3 phases. It may sound cliché, but the phrase, "a failure to plan is a plan to fail," applies perfectly to this project. The lack of planning throughout the entire project made the fact that the Opera House has been so successful as both an event space and an Australian landmark, even recouping its cost after just 2 years, nothing short of miraculous. Are there any questions?